Alright everyone, so I thought we would take a break from the big summer movie marathon of tutorials this week because, quite honestly, there's nothing remarkable opening in theaters this week, or at least nothing that would yield a great tutorial. So I thought we would not necessarily fully depart from the movies, but take a look at something I saw earlier this week and was really inspired by it. They released a new clip for the new Tron movie that they're going to be making a few years ago, and it got me thinking about the old Tron movie that came out back in the 80s and how it had the really cheesy visual effects. Of course, for the time, it was state of the art, but looking back on it, you just kind of go, ew. But at any rate, it got me thinking about it and creating some retro kind of looking graphics or kind of techno looking graphics using Photoshop, and it got me thinking about this technique that I learned from Dave Cross using vanishing point to create a very interesting effect. And I wanted to point this out because it's a very cool way of getting a three-dimensional grid, but a lot of people now don't really think about using vanishing point for this because they tend to forget that it does it altogether. So we will begin by starting with a document. Here I've gone ahead and created one, and it's just a black background. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank layer above that background layer, and we're going to go right into the filter menu and choose vanishing point. And we get this window here, and it automatically selects the Create Plane tool. And you have to create a plane before you do anything else inside of here. So what we're going to do is click and just set some points that will be our grid. Position that right about there. I'm just going to take this, and you can resize these boxes as you draw them out. And you can see that the grid is redrawing as I do this as well. And I can reposition it. I'm going to position that right off camera right about there. Or right off the canvas there. Now, what I want to do is create multiple planes. If I hold down the Command key, Control on Windows, and you click the center panel, you can actually go over here and extend out another panel. And it starts to give you kind of a 3D look to it. And if you hold down the Command key once again and drag out, it'll just keep going, dragging out multiple panels here, giving you a very interesting effect here. So we'll just drag that up to right about there. It looks pretty good. In fact, we can zoom out here and just go ahead and take that all the way off view there. I'm going to go ahead and select this side over here and do the same thing. I'm going to hold down the Command key, Control on Windows, and drag the plane up. And again, we'll drag it over. Let's drag it right out of view there. Now, we've got a little area right over here in the corner that I don't necessarily or that I want to be part of the grid. So I'm going to go over here and select this grid here, hold down the Command key here, and just drag out this plane here. So we get a little bit of a grid line there. So now I'm going to hold down my Shift key and select all these grid planes, just like that. So now what I'm going to do is go into this little menu up here at the top of the vanishing point panel, and you're going to go in here and choose Render Grids to Photoshop. Now you didn't see anything happen, but when I click OK, it'll basically render those grids we drew right onto our layer. Now this is why it's important that you have a blank layer selected before you go into vanishing point. Otherwise, it will go ahead and apply it to whatever layer is selected, even if it's the background layer. But I wanted to keep this as a separate element on its own layer, so you want to create the blank layer first. So now it's brought it over and given me that same blue fill that it did inside the vanishing point window. I don't necessarily want that, so let's go over here and lock the transparency of this layer and just give this a white fill. So with white as my background color swatch here, I'm simply going to press Command Delete. That would be Control Backspace on Windows. And now we have a white grid. Well, now what I want to do is kind of give this kind of a futuristic glow on it. So I'm going to go over here and just add a simple layer style. So I'm going to double click on the layer, and it will open up the layer style panel, and I'm just going to go over here and choose Outer Glow. And I'm going to change the color. I'm actually going to give it a blue, kind of a glow here. We'll go with that blue right about there. And I'm going to leave all these settings in place, but down here in the Elements section, I'm going to set the spread to 5 and put the size to 10. And you notice it intensifies that glow a little bit better. So we'll go ahead and click OK. So now it's looking pretty cool. It's got kind of a dimensional look, kind of a retro look to it. I kind of like it. I'm going to go ahead and throw a layer mask on that layer, and let's use our gradient tool. And I'm going to use the foreground, the transparent, with black set as my foreground color here. And I'm going to use the radial gradient, which is the second icon inside here. I'm just going to go in here in this bottom right-hand corner here and just kind of drag out and just kind of give that grid a little bit of a fade towards the bottom there. Like that. Probably come in here from the side too. Maybe a little bit up top here. Just to give a little bit of a fade. So next what I want to do is add a graphic to this. So I want it to look like there's something traveling down this grid valley here, kind of like in the game. It was, you know, how the bikes would leave a colored streak as they were traveling along. So we're going to create that graphic by, let's go create a new blank layer. I'm going to go over here in the toolbar, grab my rectangular marquee tool. And let's go ahead and turn off this grid layer so we can actually see what's going on here for now. I'm just going to draw a very narrow selection across the length of the entire document here. Or just like that. And we'll go over here into my toolbar and just click right on that foreground color swatch and open up the color picker here, and let's choose a really bright fluorescent green color. And I'm just going to press Option Delete, and it's going to go ahead and fill that selection with that color. Now what I'm going to do is go over here into the Fill section of my Layers panel. You notice we've got the opacity and the fill. I'm actually going to highlight the fill and drop that to 40%. What that's going to allow me to do is drop the transparency of what's on this layer, but when I add my layer style to this, it's going to leave the layer style 100% opaque. So I'm going to double click on that layer, and we're going to add an outer glow, and we're going to use pretty much the same color green that we did for the actual shape. And let's go ahead and increase the size of that glow a little bit. You can see it's starting to define that quite a bit. And we're going to add an inner glow, again, of the same color. Let's go over here, click on the color swatch. Get a green color here. Increase that size a little bit. So you can see the fill of this shape is actually the same color green, but by dropping that fill opacity, in fact, if we go in here inside of the blending options of the layer styles, there's that fill opacity, and it's at the same setting. So it's the same setting, we can just change it in a different place. But if I take it up to 100%, you'll notice that it's just a green streak with a glow on it. Not necessarily what I want, but by dropping this fill opacity down to 40%, it's affecting the original pixels, but not the layer style itself. The glow looks like it should. We're just modifying the actual shape. So again, we're going to click OK there. Let's turn our grid back on, and let's go over here and press Command T. I'm just going to give us a little bit of a rotation here. And I want this to be in perspective, same as the grid, like it's traveling down here. So we're going to have to apply some distortion to this. So with it still in free transform, I'm going to control or right click right on it, and we're going to choose Distort. We'll bring these points closer together as they go further away. And we'll just have this kind of traveling back here. Going out of frame there, we'll press enter. So now it looks like there's a little bit of a streak. Something's traveling along the way here. Well, now what I want to do is create another one. Now, if you remember the game, of course, there were always two bikes that were battling it out, leaving these streaks, and you had to try and trap them. So I'm going to create a duplicate of that layer, press Command T, and what I'm going to do is grab the center point of this free transform box. There's that little target right there in the center. I'm going to grab that and reposition it out here beyond the box, about where the vanishing point of this grid would be. You know, all these lines are going to converge eventually somewhere out in space here. So I'm just going to position this about where that might be, and then go in here and just give this a little bit of a rotation so it's staying in proper perspective for the most part as we kind of rotate it around. Let's kind of position it back a little bit. So maybe this one's losing the race. Give it a little bit more of a turn there. Just like that. And let's make it a little bit different by changing the color, of course. So I'm going to lock the transparency of this layer, and let's go ahead and make this one yellow. But we also have to change the layer style. So I'm going to double click on the outer glow, click on the color swatch, and just simply change this to a yellow color. Same with the inner glow. We'll give that a yellow color there. And so we've got two competing graphics going on here. It's just kind of racing along the grid, looking pretty cool. Just like that. Now, the tips of these just don't look like they really have anything there. So let's just go ahead and add a little element to that. So I'm going to create a new blank layer at the very top here. And let's grab that gradient tool we were using earlier. Again, foreground to transparent, but let's change the foreground color to white. So I'm just going to click this little arrow and bring white to the foreground. And go right in here and just draw a very small radial gradient right there at the tip of each one of these beams. But I'm going to do one on each of its own layer because I want to be able to modify these, but I also want to be able to put the different glows on them. Let's make that one a little bit smaller. So this one's on the yellow beam and this one's on the green beam, but I want to have it have the same glows on it. So what I'm going to do is actually need to copy the layer styles that are on the beams onto these little gradients. So we know that this one's on the yellow one. So a quick and easy way of copying and pasting these layer styles, hold down the Option key and then click right on that effects icon. This would be the Alt key on Windows, and just click and drag that effects icon to your target layer. Boom, there it is. And we'll do the same with the green. So we get a little bit of a green glow there, and a little bit of a yellow glow going on there. But that is pretty much it. That's just kind of a retro look, looking at the old Tron effects. And if you get a chance to look at the new Tron clip, it actually looks really, really cool. But this is just kind of an homage to the old days of the old Tron movies, you know, and inspired by the grids and very, very, very simplistic view of the way the Tron game was set up, and the movie, as a matter of fact. So, interesting way of using Vanishing Point. Again, not necessarily the way it was designed for, but it does yield some very interesting stuff. So, try it out yourself, and we'll see you next time.